Hey everyone, had a few people asking how to get 900p or other resolutions working on the ROG Ally. As you can see here, I have 900p all the way down to like 638 or 634, 600p even. So yeah, we'll kind of, as usual, just show you how to do it real quick, and then if you don't care, you can just click away after, and then we'll get into the actual results, battery life, and things like that afterwards if you're interested. So before we get into actually how to do it, I just want to give credit where credit is due. So thank you to CIPHRAY. CIPHRAY, if you're not familiar with their work, they've done auto TDP. If you're familiar with like any of Fox's videos doing auto TDP, that's kind of his preferred method. So you can find them in the GPD Discord and under CIPHRAY. If you go into the ROG Ally comment section or the thread, and then you can find the pinned comment there with this download file. So we'll get into it proper now. So thank you again, CIPHRAY. Alright, so once we get into the actual downloaded file, you can find it in the description below. I'll just leave that link there. All you have to do is just click on it and then just hit run. And then yes. And it'll give you a warning saying, hey, like registry edit files, they can change things, you can mess up things, blah, 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 blah. So I have checked this out through a hex edit as well, and I did try to edit it to get away or get rid of some of the resolutions, and it just wouldn't seem to stick for some reason, so whatever, I just left it. Brighter minds than I can probably figure it out, but I'm fine with having the additional resolutions. It doesn't really bother me anyway. But yeah, so after you hit yes, it's going to say, okay, yep, we're going to do that, and then okay, thank you, it's all been done, and now all you have to do after that is to restart your device. Alrighty, so once the device is finished restarting, we can go back into our system and display settings, and then we can go down to scale layout and then display resolution, and we can see all these new additional resolutions here that weren't here before. So before you only had access to 1280 by 720 and 1920 by 1080. There is a whole bunch of additional resolutions, so you can have 16 by 9 or 16 by 10 resolutions. 16 by 10 resolutions can come in handy when emulating some older 4 by 3 content, but for the most part you just want to stick to 16 by 9 resolutions. So 1600 by 900p is a popular resolution for 16 by 9 handhelds. There isn't, obviously the ROG Ally is not a 16 by 10 device, so it will run fine that 16 by 9, 1600 by 900p resolution. So a couple things to note when you're running 900p resolution. Obviously you can see here there's a sliding bar now at the armory crate, which wasn't here before. That's just due to the resolution change, so it's a minor thing, but something to note nonetheless. As well, when you are running, this is only when you're running it on the desktop, not on the game internally. So what I recommend you do is run your desktop in 1920 by 1080 as you would normally, and then run your games internally at 900p, and then you can use RIS or Radeon Image Sharpening, and then use that to sharpen up the image a little bit from 900p to 1080p. Now, the difference between 900p and 1080p sharpness wise isn't really that great in my opinion, or far off, especially on a handheld level. Now, if you were blown up to like a 24, 25, 20, whatever plus inch monitor, yeah, you would definitely notice the difference. And honestly, yes, you will notice the difference if you can zoom in the footage a bit. Like, I'll zoom in some footage and show the difference and everything. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're playing on a 7-inch screen, so you're not really going to notice the resolution difference that much. Like, honestly, going from 720p to 1080p, that is a pretty drastic change, somewhat. But when you go into the 900p, if you try this out on your own, you'll be kind of hard pressed to find a difference. It'll look a little bit softer, but honestly not by much. Just a few other things to note. So shout out to my buddy Gaming for Insight. You can find his channel here. Honestly, God bless him for being the only person that plays Redfall that I know of. But he found that when you were playing at a 900p resolution with Redfall and you had FSR set to, I believe it was Ultra Performance or Performance in his case, there was some texture warbling. So you can see that here where it's just not like artifacting, but it's just kind of like wavy looking. Oh, I'll be playing the footage here. So just note that when you're playing some games and utilizing FSR, you may come into an issue like this. So if you do see that, turn off FSR and you might see a difference, but if not, then you might have to do 720p or 1080p and just kind of live with it at that for those certain games. But across my testing, I haven't come across any games, but Redfall being one of them. So thank you again, Gaming for Insight, for bringing that to my attention. As well, I have found, though, that when you're playing in certain games where you need to set the desktop resolution, so Diablo 4, for instance, it won't let you set any resolution. It has to be set by the desktop resolution, which is so stupid in my opinion. So in that case, when you're setting the desktop resolution to 900p, then yeah, you just kind of have to go back and forth on the desktop. But otherwise, if you're playing at 900p internally and you have the desktop set to 1080p, I found that when you bring up the control center, sometimes it can be kind of wonky. So you see here I have it set to 900p, but it's registering at a 720p on there because they only have graphics for 720p and 1080p. So hopefully maybe in the future they'll add these resolutions and kind of optimize it a bit better for it. But anyway, so if you do go into Control Center or into Armory Crate itself, I found that sometimes it'll kick the resolution back to 1080p, and then when you go back into the game, it won't keep that 900p resolution that you set in game, so you will have to kind of switch the resolution back and forth. So you'll have to set it to in-game 1080p, and then it'll be correct because it already was 1080p, and then you'll have to go back and then set it to 900p again. So that's just another thing to note. But yeah, beyond that, I haven't really run into any issues. So if you guys are going to try this out, let me know below if you come into any issues. Let me know of any games that have problems like Redfall, where the textures aren't looking right because you're using FSR or something like that. Definitely sound off in the comments there and just let me know and let everyone else know, so they're not worrying about like that their Ally got messed up or anything. But yeah, so we'll get into the results of all the benchmarks that I did as well, and then that'll kind of wrap up the video. Alright, so starting things off with Cyberpunk 2077, medium settings, FSR 2.2 quality, not auto, so it's not fluctuating for the FSR, so it's just straight FSR quality. 3 run average, 30 watt. 720p, we get a 49.6 average. 1% low is about 21.6, and 0.1% low is around 11. Now 800p, we only lost 1 FPS on the average there, and then we actually gained in the 1% lows, interestingly enough, and we were a little bit lower in 0.1% lows. Now going to 900p, we actually lost just about 10 FPS there for the FPS average, going from 800p to 900p, and we lost 10 FPS going from 720 to 900. Now we did keep the same 21 FPS 1% low, and we did keep the same 9.6. The 720p did have 11, so that did have the best, but honestly not by much. Now going all the way down to, or up to, I guess technically, 1080p, we can see that we lost another roughly 10 FPS, not even, but so then the 1% lows actually suffered quite a bit, and the 0.1% lows not so much, but they were lower. So honestly, this is going from 1080p being a kind of choppy 30 FPS. If you play at 900p, you're getting a relatively solid kind of 30 to 40 FPS with those kind of dips here and there. And just keep in mind that the benchmark running, it's designed to be heavier, but obviously in game you will find heavier scenes than what you can produce in the benchmark, but at least it's just kind of a good insight to these repeatable benchmarks that I'm doing. So now if we go to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, lowest FPS or graphics settings, because that's kind of like the, I guess, what everyone sort of does when they're playing on the Ally, because it produces the highest frames, and then going FSR 1, not 2, quality, because FSR 2 does take a bigger hit on the CPU, so we do lose some frames. FSR 1 will give us higher frames at the degradation of image quality, but again, playing on a handheld screen, you're not going to notice it as opposed to like playing on a 40-inch screen or something. So playing at 720p, we get 105 FPS average, 68.6, 1% low, and 44.1% low. Going to Steam Deck resolution, we only lost about 4 FPS there, and the 1% lows were about the same, and 0.1% lows, curiously, were significantly higher, which is kind of interesting, but whatever. So going to the 900p, we actually did lose quite a bit in performance there, so 85 FPS versus 105, and then the 1% lows actually were about the same. So I mean yeah, and the 0.1% lows, they were the same as 720p. 800p here is an outlier. Again, it's 3-run average. I don't know why it was doing significantly higher in the 1.1% lows, but so be it. Then going down to 1080p, we're getting a 72 FPS average. So honestly, again, this is kind of like 1080p. I would probably do a 60 FPS cap on that, because when you're playing above 60 FPS and you want to take advantage of that VRR, I find you get the most kind of benefit when you're 75, 80 FPS and above consistently. You're kind of in that sweet spot around 90 to 120. That's like the kind of gravy spot, and then everything over that is just extra, in my opinion. You will notice gradual increases, but even going up to like 244 or something, that's kind of like the max of my noticeable perceived difference, to be honest. Some people might be a little bit more sensitive or whatever, but so again, I would recommend locking 1080p to 60 FPS, and then 900p here is a very unlocked viable candidate. If you want to play an unlocked VRR game, go ahead. Now, going to Forza Horizon 5, medium settings, no MSAA and no FSR. Now, I know you would particularly want to run MSAA, and that's because it will sharpen up the image, but I just wanted to do this with no like kind of post-processing, just to see what it would do like straight up like medium settings. So 30 watt 3-run average, we got 63.6 FPS at 720p. Steam Deck settings, we got 62 FPS, and then the 1% lows were higher again than 720p, which is funny. 900p, we got higher 1% lows and 0.1% lows compared to 720p as well. On 900p, we got the 56.3 versus 63.6 FPS average. Going down 1080p, we got 47.6, and yeah, again, at that point, I would lock the FPS to probably 40 for 1080p, but if you're playing a 900p, yeah, go for it. Just play unlocked if you want, or you can lock it to 45 hertz and kind of play it at that. And then finally going to Hitman 3. This is a kind of a favorite of mine just because it does hit the CPU and the GPU pretty intensely. So 720p, we got 63.6, 32 and 26, 1%, 0.1% lows. 61, 31, 26 for the Steam Deck resolution. Now going to 900p, the kind of targeted resolution here, we did lose about 10 FPS on average there, and we did lose about 4 FPS on the 1% lows, and 2 FPS on the 0.1% lows. Now going to 1080p, we got down to 44.6 and 24 and 26 on the 0.1% low. That is kind of interesting. I probably mixed those up. I apologize. So it's 26 and 24. My sincerest apologies. Now, so taking a look at this, again, this would be like kind of the, okay, 1080p, I'd be probably capping at 40 FPS, but 900p, yeah, go for it. Or you can, again, cap it at 900 or at 40 FPS and then increase your battery savings. Basically, that's kind of what you could do it for, at capping your FPS at a lower resolution, like 720p. If you're running at a 30 or 40 FPS, the battery savings would be phenomenal. Now, I did do a 3D Mark Timespy. This is the DirectX 12, not the DirectX 12 Ultimate test. So 30 watt 3-run average. We can see here that the GPU score is kind of what we're looking at. The CPU score obviously won't really change too much because it's, yeah, it's not really affecting that. So we're going through the resolutions here. So we can see 720p, we got an average of 6102, and then from 800p, we got 56.18, and you can see it just like stair steps down in terms of performance all the way down to 1080p. Again, these numbers kind of mean nothing to me, so I'm not really going to comment on them too much, but some people like to see them just in terms of performance and where it sits at, so there you have it. And then finally, for battery life, I did battery life testing, doing the looping Hitman 3 benchmark, 50% brightness and 25% volume on the speakers, because that's kind of where I usually play my games at, and I find that that's a decent enough kind of loudness level for me to play my games and enjoy them. And yeah, so doing those tests, honestly, we got an hour and 24 minutes on both. Basically, the difference was down to seconds. So running at 1080p or 900p, it honestly didn't really save me much battery life in the instance of running an uncapped scenario in the looping benchmark. Now, again, if you were to take 900p and cap your refresh rate to 45 or 30 and then running it there, and you will save battery life in that respect. But in terms of just raw, like, okay, you're doing 900p and 1080p neck to neck unlocked, you're not going to see that much of a difference in battery life. You might in some tests, depending on what you're doing, but in gaming scenarios, likely it's going to be negligible at best. and there you have it. It's probably not as quick of a video as I would have liked, but as always, I just keep the know-how to do at the beginning and then go into the performance numbers so people can watch on if they so choose, or click off if they just want to know how to do it, and see you later. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I just want to take a second to give a shout out to my members, Joey VR, Rico1217, Amoa, Darkstar, and Roy Watney, but I believe it's Roy Wayne, so I'm not 100% certain. But either way, you guys are amazing, so I appreciate all of you, and thank you to everyone watching this video right now. It really does mean a lot to me that you do choose to click on these videos, and even if you only watch it for a second to give me a down vote or something, whatever. But nonetheless, it means something to me. So again, yeah, to kind of conclude everything, 900p is now like kind of my go-to resolution, because there's not really too much of a difference in performance, I'd say, or at least in image quality performance. I mean, there is a difference in performance. There's a big difference in performance, as I showed, but the difference in image quality isn't that great in my opinion. So it's like sharper eyes than mine might be able to see the difference, but honestly, in conjunction with Radeon image sharpening, and if you have that set up properly, you can go into the AMD overlay and then just kind of punch in there. You can set the overlay to on and then see when it's working and when it's not working. But yeah, beyond that, if you guys have any questions, or if you want to let me know how your performance is going into your games that you're playing, let me know in the comments below. If you want to say whatever, that I'm a jerk or anything, go ahead. Doesn't matter to me, honestly. So yeah, thank you again for watching, and as always, I hope everyone has a great day.